Good morning, everybody. Good morning to you in Neepawa. Thanks for joining us this morning. We give you that cheer as our sincere, heartfelt welcome to you this morning. Chris took a couple shots at me earlier this morning, which was great because now I get to return the favor. Often, if a sermon is boring, it's going to be the fault of the person who's preaching it, but in the case this morning, if it's boring, it's actually Chris's fault. Because we had some miscommunication this week. He's preaching next week, and we were going back and forth about what verses I should be preaching on because he had his heart set on this certain text that's coming up, and I, for whatever reason, didn't really clue in what he was talking about, and I thought that he was talking about, and you'll see when we get to it, it's this text about Jesus' family being hard on him and about Beelzebub, which is about Satan. And I'm like, Chris really wants to preach about Satan. Like, he's just really wants to dive into this, and I'm like, really? Okay, but I'm like, I know, that leaves me like kind of a boring text. Not much happens in this next little stretch, and he was just convicted he had to preach about Beelzebub. So he gets Beelzebub, he gets the other stuff. I'm stuck with this, the like Mark equivalent of driving to Moose Jaw. Oh, but what we'll see is what you sometimes see on drives like that. You're like mentally maybe preparing for something that's going to be a bit of a grind, and then you see something. Maybe it's a sunrise or sunset, or I guess if you're going to Moose Jaw, it would always be a sunset. Something beautiful. Maybe there's a deer, like something. I don't know, whatever. There might be something that looks good. In this text, we're surprised. I was certainly surprised as I dove into it. So we'll go through it, and then I'll just pull out that thing that really struck me, and I think it'll challenge us to living different kinds of lives than we might be living right now, which is for our joy always and God's glory. Those two things go together. Jesus, you'll remember last week, the last thing we read was, and the liberals and the conservatives decided to go off and plan together how they're going to kill Jesus. We're not talking about the political parties. We're talking about two very different groups of people being united in the hatred of somebody who won't fit their box, wanting to get rid of him. So the Herodians and the Pharisees, they take off and they're going to plan how to kill Jesus. They sort of represent the old Jewish culture, the Jewish nationalists. It's like if you wanted to change Israel, you'd probably start with them because they have the influence. But they don't seem to want to change. In fact, they want to kill Jesus. So Jesus takes off and does something differently. Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the lake, and a large crowd from Galilee followed. When they heard about all he was doing, many people came to him from Judea, Jerusalem, Idumea, and the regions across the Jordan around Tyre and Sidon. So you're imagining now a geographical region. Jesus is here, and people are coming from about 80 miles. 80 miles kind of on this side, and south almost 150. So I don't know how far you've walked in your life, but these people, the word of mouth about Jesus, because that's all that there is spreading so fast, it's so compelling that you've got people, and often sick people struggling with mental illness of some sort, making this choice to put themselves at a considerable, grueling journey just to be near him. And when they get close to him, they're not going to be denied. Because here's what they've heard. All you have to do is touch this man, and you'll be healed. All you have to do is like physically touch him, and sometimes you feel power from him coming into you, and whatever was ailing you goes. Whatever you came for gets taken care of. You can imagine the crowd control around an event like this. You've got all these people, they're like, we finally made it. And then there's a crowd, they're like, well, I'm not going to be denied. I came farther than him. I'm not waiting. I just took like 4 weeks to get here. And they're pressing on him. Because of the crowd, he told his disciples to have a small boat ready for him to keep the crowd from crowding him. So the crowd control strategy is to put Jesus in a boat, back him off the shore, however far it is, so that it's really inconvenient for people to get to him, and then he can still teach. So the disciples, it's like if you read the rest of Mark, you'll see this little boat keeps reappearing. It's like Jesus' little crowd control boat. They just bring it along with them. And when they need it, it's like, into the boat, Jesus. It's getting tense. And he backs up a little bit, and he can actually do what he wants to do without getting mauled. For he had healed many, so that those with diseases, next verse here, for he had healed many, so that those with diseases were pushing forward to touch him. Whenever the impure spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You're the Son of God." We've seen this before. The only people who have spoken with any accuracy so far in Mark is Jesus, he's talked about himself, and demons. Nobody else is clued into who this is. Jesus doesn't really want other people to clue in. He doesn't mind it when he drops the hints, but it's not the cat for the demons to let out of the bag, so he silences them. He gives them strict orders, next verse, to not tell others about him. Then Jesus went up on a mountainside and called to him those he wanted, and they came to him. He took out of the crowd 12. He appoints 12 that they might be with him and that he might send them out to preach and to have authority to drive out demons. I want those of you who are used to being at PAC to frame this in our upside down rhythm. They are to preach and talk about him, that's up, connect people to Jesus. They are to be with him and each other, there's a group of them, that's side. And then they are to cast demons out of people, that's sort of a sensational way of serving people. But it points in that direction. Somebody is well served when they have had a spiritual force afflicting them and somebody comes along and takes care of that. You're being well served. So that's upside and down. He invites them into this upside down life. When he takes them up the mountain, you need to understand this isn't a retreat. This is like, let's get to know each other, let's do some icebreakers, let's kind of, you're Bartholomew, Jesus, good to meet you. It's not that kind of thing. The mountain is where you go to plot revolution. You take the revolutionaries, the ones that you think can handle the rigors of what you're planning, and you go up into the mountain and you hide and you train, and you get ready for when you come back down and you bring revolution. Really clear that Jesus is doing this. He has said no to existing Israel, which is formed of 12 tribes, said no to the Herodians, he said no to the Pharisees. Then he chooses how many people to come with him? 12. He's forming a new nation of 12 tribes, taking them up to the mountain and planning revolution. And so if you were a Roman official, or probably more likely a Jewish official, and you saw these 12 men and Jesus, this well-known revolutionary would-be Messiah, in a cave up in the mountains, you'd be suspicious of what they've got on the go. In the same way, if somebody came across you and you're in a cellar somewhere with 5 or 6 people and like little lights on your head, and you got the blueprints for the Scotia Bank in town in front of you. People are going to have some questions. This might not be the most innocent of gatherings. Jesus plotting revolution with the people that he's going to equip to tell others about him, to be with him and each other, and to cast out demons. And here's the names of the 12. Simon, who he called Peter, James the son of Zebedee and his brother John, to whom he called the sons of thunder, Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, Thomas, James the son of Alphaeus, Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot. We don't know lots about many of these, and I was in a church over our sabbatical a couple years ago where, I think without thinking about it, the pastor in the church that we were in decided to do a sermon on each character in this line. And I mean, you got to squeeze the sponge pretty hard to get any moisture out of that. I need to test my metaphors earlier than just here. So we've got, but we happened to be there for James, the son of Alphaeus. And the whole sermon was basically, you can't say much about James, the son of Alphaeus, but you know what you can say? He was there. Like over and over, you know, and so Jesus did this, and we don't know what James did, but we know he was there. And I was like, where are you guys? Where are you? I'm like, I have no idea where I am. I don't know what you, anyway, this is the text. Thank you, Chris. This is what we're left with. So it seems to me like what we can do here is understand the distinction Jesus is making between all the people that come to get something from him and the people that get to be with him. We can draw a pretty firm line between the experience of the 12, called apostles. Now, apostles can be a technical term that people argue about. Are there apostles? Are there not apostles? Was there 12? Is there more? For our purposes, that's not really at issue here. Because certainly we know in our lives that there's some people that come to Jesus to get what they can from him, and then there's others that seem to know him really well. others that enjoy the community around him, and others that are uniquely empowered to really make a difference in people's lives, whether that's cast out demons or otherwise. So the technical definition of apostle isn't here nor there in this text. It's just that there's these two groups of people who come to Jesus to get what they came for, and others who have a different sort of experience. Let's call the first group, the group that comes to get what they can from Jesus, let's call them the beneficiaries. I think I said that right. Beneficiaries. Yes. So, these are the people who are going to benefit from the revolution. They don't have much to do with the revolution. They themselves haven't worked to turn the world upside down. They've done some noble things in the case, especially in this text. They have sacrificed to get there. But they're not a part of what's driving this thing forward. They have come, they'll get what they came for, and then they presumably will go back home. And then there's another group, let's call them the revolutionaries. We're making a distinction between the beneficiaries and the revolutionaries. And they have a very different kind of life. A very, very different kind of life. Huge difference between being a beneficiary and being a revolutionary. And if we read through the rest of the New Testament, all of the thought and the culture and the call that develops around Jesus, you get the strong, strong impression that what he's calling everybody to over time is to fit into that revolutionary category and not the beneficiary category. And so we need to think ourselves this morning, which category do we fit into? Because you will see as we unpack the difference between beneficiary and revolutionary that one is tremendous joy and one kind of just is a very different kind of lukewarm life. Beneficiaries revolutionaries benefit from a few different things that aren't on the table for beneficiaries. First, revolutionaries, because they're hanging around Jesus, they're praying to him up most every day. They're cultivating a sense of his presence. They're confessing their sins. They have a sense of his immediacy, and they're telling other people about him. They live saturated in a mindset and a heart set of Jesus being really, really near all the time. He's not something that they pull out of the closet when they need help or something on a Sunday morning that is relatively inspiring. That's the beneficiary. The revolutionary lives and breathes and moves in Jesus. And because they're keeping company with Jesus, what happens to a human heart when it's keeping company with somebody is that that heart changes to mirror who they're around. Your actual desires change. You really, really want things in your life that people who aren't a part of your circle of friends who want the same things think are ridiculous. Your desires are tweaked and shaped and internalized by the people that are around you who you're hanging around with. So you have to be careful who you're hanging around with, but it's funny to think about some of this stuff that I just take for granted. Because I hang around a group of cross-country mountain bikers, my desire is to spend $1,500 next week so that I can buy mountain bike wheels. Not 4 bikes for my family, wheels. This will be an upgrade over the $800 set of wheels that I have. This will make me probably about 200 grams lighter on my bike. You're looking at me like, this makes no sense. Your desires are out of whack. That's just the wrong crowd. Right? I just got to find that crowd. Because in that crowd, they'll say, you know what, Nathan, if you only spent another $600, then you'd get what you really wanted. You've never, ever likely hung out with a bunch of other snowmobilers after a while and gone, you know what, I need a slower sled. This is just too much sled for me. You have never gone to a home show with your friends and said, you know what, everything's pretty good in my house as it is. What with the running water and the heat? It's pretty good. Everybody who went to the home show was like, what are you talking about? So who you hang around with shapes your desires, and it's an incredible thing to hang around with Jesus and have your desires changed. You actually move from being somebody who wants to receive to somebody who wants to give. Paul quotes Jesus as saying it's better to give than receive. And that's actually, we don't have anywhere that Jesus said that. Paul just seems to know that he said that. So Jesus said it's better to give than to receive. Now, what you need to understand, and this is just critical with all of Jesus' teachings, is that Jesus doesn't have a chart on the wall somewhere that says, what is good? And then he watches you, and when you give instead of receive, he says, oh, that's good, click. As if it's like a detached moral thing that if you do good things, he's happy with you. Of course he is. But when Jesus says it's better to give than to receive, that goodness, the better, it's more like this. It's better for you if you give than receive. It's way better for you, your heart, your soul, your well-being, your joy, to give than to receive. So when he changes your desires, and you, by hanging around him and his community, start to want different things, you want those things that are good for other people. And some of us, this is an awkward conversation that we have with people. They look at a choice you've made, whether that's money or time or space or hospitality. Maybe you downsized. Maybe you just kind of got off the grader and up and to the right kind of thing. And they look at you and they go, I can't imagine the sacrifice. How did you do that? And we don't know what to say because what they're describing as sacrifice is the source of our greatest joy. So what they're imagining must be incredible sacrifice is actually the fountain of joy in your life. Because God has changed your desires to be the kind of person who does that stuff, the kind of person who sacrifices that way, and then when your desires are changed, you get to do that, you get what you want, you're happy. So people are imagining you grinding out this existence and it's like, no, actually that's the source of my greatest joy. Because I've been hanging around Jesus so much, he's actually changed my heart. So this stuff gives me joy. Revolutionaries get to have their desires changed because of who they're hanging around with. Another neat thing about revolutionaries that beneficiaries don't get is I think revolutionaries have less doubt. Part of it is because doubt comes when you're not doing anything. You get to really overthink things. And it's all theoretical. So if Jesus leads you to the side of a cliff, a figurative cliff, to serve or to stretch or to whatever, and you do that, and he meets you there, there's not a lot of place for doubt. One of the words in the book of Mark is immediately, 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 immediately. It's the pace of the revolution. When you stop and you overthink and you wonder, should I this, should I that, I wonder if Jesus would. Some things are just abundantly clear to revolutionaries that aren't to beneficiaries. Because see, the revolutionary just has to say, am I in this action or thought bringing the kingdom of God? Yes. Okay, boom, I'm a revolutionary. Done. The beneficiary has to find that sweet spot where I can kind of give enough to the revolution, but still make sure I got enough coming my way. That takes a long time. That takes a lot of balancing, and you end up generally teetering just over into the beneficiary side of things, I think. And then, because you're not working with Jesus, you're not being part of the revolution with Jesus, you start to wonder, does Jesus actually do stuff? Is he actually near? Beneficiaries they end up living in a largely theoretical faith. Revolutionaries can't afford to be theoretical. Immediately they're doing something. Immediately they're doing something. Immediately. So one has doubts, and one just knows, because I'm with Jesus and I do this stuff with Jesus and I get joy from doing it with Jesus, and we're just on a mission together. And when you're on a mission with somebody, you don't doubt their existence or their strength, really. You're just with them. The third thing, I should hold up 3 fingers when I say 3. The third thing is that beneficiaries have a life that slowly shrinks over time. As they age, their life shrinks smaller and smaller and smaller. Revolutionaries, their life gets bigger and bigger and bigger. They get more impact, deeper impact as they get older. This is critical. Beneficiaries are oriented to asking this question, what can I get out of this? When you ask, what can I get out of this, your tastes get better and better over time. You start to get a really refined palate about what gives you joy. So I need to come to this experience as a beneficiary, receiving something that's been done for me, but I have to receive it in a way that gives me joy. And you become like sort of like a coffee snob, but for things of the kingdom. So the coffee snob at some point in their life, you'd imagine they didn't need to have the bean roasted over a chestnut fire, eaten by a cat and worked its way through its excretory system, and then just ground in a certain way. At some point in their life, their version of coffee wasn't that narrow. But now it's like, no, that's all I drink. And so they didn't start there. Some of you are really scared of things you shouldn't be scared of. You literally have 2 things to do next week. A hair appointment, and you got to put the gas, fill it with car. I'd be worried about that. If you that's legit. If you're dousing your car with gas, then it's stuff on the go. How do you get there? How do you get to a place where stuff seems so intimidating and so big, and if I just, it's going to be out of control, because you move from revolutionary. The revolutionary isn't worried about their schedule or their pace. If they die for the cause, that's okay because that's what they intended to do. They're aiming for martyrdom, not retirement. Imagine what would happen in the kingdom of God if all of us in this room said, I'm never going to retire, I'm going to be a martyr. I'm going to be part of this revolution, and if it's a kingdom thing, done in my life. I'm not going to try to balance this stuff, figure it out, nuance it, make sure I'm getting there. No, it's not the behavior of a revolutionary. That's the behavior of somebody who maybe comes from far away, has the look of devoutness because of the length of the journey they made, but then they go back home. But they didn't go up the mountain. Jesus is calling you up the mountain as a revolutionary. No questions asked. Jesus, yes, 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 immediately, immediately, immediately. Now you need to not miss, in like a little bit of my antagonism, is that I'm shouting in your direction so that you move towards joy. This is good for you. Having a small little life sucks for you, and it'll suck for the people around you. At the end of your life, and here's what actually people think at the end of their life, and it's changed in the last 200 years. People at the end of their life, and usually through their lives, about 200 years ago and before that, would look to the future and they would say, I wonder if I'm going to be condemned. This is just a sociological fact. This is how it's shifted in the West. People lived their lives wondering if they were going to be condemned. But now, for the most part, people don't think about that. Now they wonder, am I going to be fulfilled? Am I going to be significant? But significant is the life of the revolutionary, and it takes a little bit to get there. So then we settle for significance as being, did I buy the right stuff? And at the end of your life, you will not look back and wonder if you bought the right stuff. You will not probably look back and wonder, did I squeeze every drop of life for myself that I possibly could so that my life truly mattered? Like, no, that's not what makes a life matter. At the end of your life, Lord willing, if you're a revolutionary and you've been up the mountain, you will look back and you will see dozens, if not hundreds, of people that you have impacted incredibly because of your sacrificial, martyred life. And those will be just the ones you know about. That's a joyous, rapturous way to die. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the course. I have kept the faith. So very different than what a beneficiary would say at the end of their life, yes? I left a nest egg to the kids. I was debt-free. I got to retire early. And that place we got in Costa Rica had appreciated in value. I'm not saying that one is right or wrong because that makes people mad. I'm saying you only want this one. In your deepest heart, you aren't worried about being condemned. You're worried about being fulfilled. You're worried about making a difference. And Jesus here very clearly says there's some who come to me to get what they want and leave, and then there's some that I call up the mountain and they come with me, and you guys all know their names because they've been tremendously influential in human history. Here's the thing this morning. Jesus is calling you up the mountain with him. You want to go. Why are you still living like a beneficiary? Is the band here? I'm sure everyone's in the mood to sing. Let's stand, let's sing together. Why don't you stay on your feet? Just two things here as we wind down. The first, we do need to commend and rejoice in, let's say, those folks who are aiming for martyrdom that are here. So you're in your 60s, and your house church is a bunch of people in their 20s and 30s. A bunch of you are in kids' church. You have disposable income younger people don't have, and you're generous with it. You're to be commended as you aim for martyrdom. This wasn't for you. This is for your peers and others who, and even early on, who just make little choices here day by day that put us in the beneficiary camp till it gets to a place where it almost feels too late. It's not too late. Make those choices early. And the second thing, let me speak to fear. When there's a revolution going on and the chief rebel, the figurehead, the general, is leading it, I don't know a whole lot of military strategy, but I know a lot of times what they needed to do is make sure that this one, the leader, is protected, because if the leader dies, the revolution falls apart. Really what rebels are scared of is that their leader will die and the thing will fall apart. Revolutionaries, your leader can't die. So you never have to imagine a future without him. So every step of revolution you take, he's going to be there with you. So you don't have to be scared. Fear is unreasonable given who the leader of this revolution is. Let me pray for you and then we're done. Prayer teams will be in the corners here. Jesus, thank you for calling us to follow you. We're struck with the demons knowing who you are. They clearly believe. But there's this category of people that live lives that we long for, that get to know you in ways that we long for, that you invite up the mountain, and you're calling each of us to follow you that way. So Holy Spirit, bring to our minds those things that are holding us back. Expose them as the silliness that they are. Expose them at the lies that they are. Thank you, Jesus, our leader, that you can't die. In your name, amen. Have a good day, guys. See you next week.